During yesterday's show, I made a prediction that, in retrospect, was a bit premature. I said that Apple's Mother Nature skit would be by far the cringiest example of corporate virtue signaling over the past few weeks. And in case you missed it, Tim Cook trotted out an overweight black woman playing Gaia, who was written to be as obnoxious and overbearing as possible. And this plus-sized Mother Nature kept harassing a bunch of chubby multicultural actors playing Apple executives about their environmental initiatives. And of course, the Apple executives, being the committed pagans that they are, somehow managed to meet all of her demands. And after watching that, in my defense, it didn't seem like any other major corporation could one-up Apple in terms of over-the-top, shameless pandering to the most unappealing, self-loathing elements of the far left. But as it turns out, Apple was not the only big company recently that has been looking to exploit the archetype of a severely overweight black woman for political gain. Dove, which is supposedly a beauty company, has just doubled down on that strategy. They've hired a morbidly obese BLM grifter by the name of Ziana Bryant. And this effort by them in terms of wokeness, it really takes the cake in every conceivable sense of the phrase. Dove's latest marketing strategy is not simply cringy. It's not simply calibrated to deliver a very clear anti-white message. It's also a window into the logical endpoint of leftism, because it's a manifestation of all of the 7 deadly sins, really, but especially gluttony and sloth. Now, before I get into why this is such a revealing moment, we should begin with the first Instagram video that Dove has paid this Ziana Bryant person to make. And this is apparently what companies do now when they want to light their reputations on fire. Bud Light did it, and now Dove is getting in on the action. Watch.
My belief is that we should be centering the voices and experiences of the most marginalized people and communities at all times. So when I think about what fat liberation looks like to me, it looks like centering the voices and the experiences of those who live in and who maneuver through spaces and institutions in a fat body. It looks like making accessible spaces and having conversations that are aware of the fact that people have different bodies and that they are interacting with space and people and institutions and communities in a different way.
Beautiful woman, obviously, goes without saying. Now, and notice also she says we have to center the voices of supposedly marginalized people at all times, So she should be the center always. There's never a time when anyone else should be at the center. It's always her. Now, this is not the critical point here, but it's always also worth noting the absurd, comically pretentious way that these people speak. The woke crowd speaks in something that is not really a human language. I mean, nobody talks this way. Maneuvering through spaces in a fat body. No normal human being would ever use a phrase like that, okay? When have you ever heard someone say that in conversation? Well, I'm just maneuvering through this space in a body. You're not maneuvering through a space in a fat body. You're just a fat girl walking into a room. That's what you're doing. But their worldview is so empty, it's so vacuous, it's so lacking in any intellectual substance that they have to add 14 extra syllables to every sentence to distract people from the fundamental stupidity of everything that they're saying. Anyway, Ziana Bryant is a member of a marginalized group, she says, and she's seeking something called fat liberation. Now, you might assume that the way to achieve fat liberation is to go for a jog and eat a salad, but that's not what she means. And to her, it means that we need to be aware of the fact that people have different bodies. Apparently, that was something that most Americans were not aware of. We needed Ziana Bryant to tell us people have different bodies, and then we all said, "Oh, people have." I thought everyone had the same body. I didn't realize fat people existed because we somehow didn't notice you when you walked into the room. Now, to understand what the actual purpose of this advertising campaign is, you need to know more about Ziana Bryant and why she's a hero in leftist circles. So that goes back to the summer of 2020, during the BLM riots, when Bryant, who again is supposedly a member of a marginalized group, destroyed the life of a white student at the University of Virginia named Morgan Bettinger. The details of what happened are outlined in Bettinger's recent lawsuit against UVA, alleging anti-white discrimination by the school's administrators who endorsed Bryant's lies. This is a lawsuit that hasn't gotten much coverage, but ultimately it could rival the landmark litigation against Oberlin by Gibson's Bakery, which Oberlin smeared as racist. We talked about that in the past. That lawsuit, as you might remember, ended with a $36 million verdict against Oberlin. And UVA may soon face something similar. So here's the background. On the evening of July 17th, 2020, Bettinger was driving through downtown Charlottesville in her Subaru station wagon. And that's when she came across a massive BLM protest that, as BLM protests tend to do, was blocking all of the major roads in town. Demonstrators were lying on the roadway, obstructing traffic. And to protect these protesters from getting hit by cars, the city of Charlottesville deployed a dump truck to block the main road completely. So the city did not arrest the BLM rioters for breaking the law and preventing people from going where they needed to go. Instead, the city effectively encouraged them and even participated in the riot by blocking the roads to give them space to riot, which goes back to the infamously, several years ago, the mayor of Baltimore said that if people want to riot, we need to give them space to destroy. And that, of course, is what many cities did during 2020, Charlottesville no exception. So they lent the thugs a dump truck for the purpose of being able to have the riot. Now, Bettinger, understandably, didn't know what to do. She was trying to get home from her 12-hour shift at her summer job, and she didn't know, how am I supposed to get home? You blocked all the roads. After waiting a bit, she exited her car, approached the dump truck driver to see what was going on. And she said the following words to the dump truck driver, or something to this effect, okay? She said, quote, "Well, it's a good thing you're here because otherwise they could be speed bumps," referring to the protesters lying in the street. Like saying that, well, it's good you're here because otherwise people are going to run over them and they turn into speed bumps. This was such an innocuous conversation that when university investigators later asked the dump truck driver about it, he had no recollection that Bettinger had said anything to him because it was nothing. It was a nothing conversation, and there was nothing threatening in her tone. She was making an idle observation to one person about the fact that the dump truck driver was preventing those rioters from getting run over by cars. But some of the BLM rioters nearby heard Bettinger's comment, and they decided that it was somehow a threat. And they swarmed her car and threatened to kill her. One of the BLM activists who didn't hear what Bettinger said, but was nonetheless very offended by it, was Ziana Bryant. Bryant wrote a series of viral tweets claiming that Bettinger's statement, which she heard about secondhand, amounted to a dangerous act of white supremacy. For example, she wrote, quote, "Email these UVA deans now to demand that Morgan face consequences for her actions and that UVA stop graduating racists." Remember, the BLM rioters swarmed her car, attacking her, but she's the one who needs to face consequences. In response to this, local news outlets accepted Bryant's claims without any hesitation. One outlet, Seaville, reported that Bettinger had issued a chilling and violent threat. Several UVA faculty members openly mocked Bettinger as well as Bettinger's faith and called for her immediate expulsion. The school opened not one, but 3 investigations into Bettinger. And ultimately, UVA kicked her out of school, banned her from stepping foot on campus. They released public statements implying that she's a white supremacist. Very quickly, under the guidance of a UVA dean, a 4-member panel of undergraduates convicted Bettinger of misconduct during one of these kangaroo trials at 3 a.m. This was not exactly a rigorous judicial process. Evidence shows that if the panel of undergraduates didn't convict her, they feared that the day's big football game would have been canceled by a BLM riot. So under the threat of riots, they convicted her of, they gave the rioters exactly what they wanted. Now, around the same time, as the lawsuit lays out, UVA took other actions that made it clear that they have a strong and pervasive anti-white bias on campus. To give one example, a black student stood up and told white students to leave the common area on campus and because they're white, and the administration didn't do anything about it. And that incident was caught on video. Several more examples just like that one in the suit. It wasn't until more than a year after the incident that UVA cleared Bettinger of wrongdoing, although they still treated her like a pariah. And Ziana Bryant, at long last, over a year later, admitted that she might have misheard what she was told secondhand. And so maybe she was wrong about it. But by that point, the damage was done. Bettinger's career prospects were ruined. She wanted to go to law school, but no law school would take her. Her employer fired her. She was smeared publicly nationwide as a white supremacist. After all the death threats and investigations and the public smear campaign, to this day, Morgan Bettinger suffers from an array of serious psychological problems. I mean, this is actual real trauma that she's suffering from. And just to emphasize the injustice that was done to Bettinger, consider that this treatment would have been way, way overboard, even if she had really done what they accused her of doing. So even if she had said in a threatening or taunting way that the idiots lying in the road would become speed bumps, or even if she said they should become speed bumps, even if she got out of her car and yelled and said, "You all should become speed bumps, you're lying in the road, you morons." Let's say she had said that. She didn't, but what if she did? That still would not even come close to justifying anything that was done to her. In that case, she would be expressing entirely understandable frustration at the moronic thugs clogging up the roads. And she would be saying and thinking what really almost everyone says, or at least thinks, when there are a bunch of idiot protesters blocking the road. And she shouldn't face any consequence at all for that. But that's not what happened. That's not what she said or did. And her life was still destroyed. Well, it's clear that the left is giving up their morals and any common sense. There's no better time to build a habit of daily prayer and meditation. Building a habit of prayer can help you cultivate an attitude of gratitude. Focusing on what you are thankful for can increase positive emotions and improve overall well-being. Hallow is the #1 Christian prayer app in the U.S. It helped me maintain a daily prayer routine. Can help you do the same. Download the app for free at hallow.com/Matt Walsh. You can set prayer reminders and track your progress along the way. Not sure where to start? Well, check out Father Mike Schmitz's Bible in a Year podcast, available on the Hallow app, or pray alongside Mark Wahlberg, Jim Caviezel, even some world-class athletes. With Hallow, you can customize a personal prayer plan that works for you. Listen wherever you are with downloadable offline sessions. Using Hallow to connect with others who share your beliefs and values can provide a sense of belonging, support, and foster a sense of community as well. Ultimately, we'll learn how we can become better individuals in spite of today's broken world as we strive to become more like Christ in our daily lives through prayer, fasting, and giving. Download Hallow at hallow.com/Matt Walsh and get an exclusive 3 months free. That's 3 months absolutely free at hallow.com/Matt Walsh. Ziona Bryant's life, on the other hand, has had a very different trajectory. For destroying a white student at UVA based on a falsehood, Bryant has received one award after another. In 2021, a year after her lies went viral, Bryant was honored by Al Sharpton's National Action Network, which is supposedly a civil rights group. The National Action Network named Bryant as somehow the Youth Activist of the Year. And here's part of her acceptance speech. Watch.
I am so honored to be receiving this year's Youth Activist of the Year award. I know that young people have always led the way on the front lines of some of our country's most progressive issues, and even internationally. Young Black youth are so multifaceted, so gifted, so talented, and able to bring together crowds of people of many different ages and many different walks of life.
Well, Ziona Bryant definitely demonstrated that she can bring people together, bring crowds of people together, as she says. That much is clear. What the National Action Network is doing here is honoring someone who gathered a lynch mob to harass, threaten, and defame a young woman, a young innocent woman, solely because of her skin color. 2 years later, Dove is doing the same thing. Now, at some level, this isn't surprising. Dove has been on this trajectory for a while. They've unleashed one woke advertising campaign after another. This month, the company set up billboards in New York's Times Square showing a bunch of women exposing their unshaven armpits. And as Outkick pointed out recently, Dove is owned by Unilever, which owns Ben & Jerry's, maybe the single most anti-American corporation you can find outside of Tehran. This is a beauty company that is clearly set on promoting ugliness and left-wing propaganda. But I repeat myself. But even by the standards of corporate wokeness, this latest move by Dove is extraordinary. I mean, it's revolting in every sense, yes, and it's a deeply bizarre act of self-sabotage by a brand that's already flailing. But it's also a clear sign that we're approaching perhaps the end of the runaway train of leftist ideology that's taken hold of this country in recent years. The fat liberation movement that they're embracing is, you might say, the logical endpoint of leftism. It's what we've been leading up to after the past decade or so. Fat liberation and body acceptance explicitly promote and glorify hedonism. They enable the most useless people to feel like martyrs and heroes. I mean, all you have to do is lie around and eat, and suddenly you're part of a movement. And once you're that inert and powerless, there's not much else you can do. There's not really any more activism you can undertake at that point. I expect the fat liberation movement to become more and more popular. Like this is the movement of the future. This is the future of leftism. Because it's the perfect opportunity for those who crave victim points. All you have to do is nothing but eat. And you can gain access to a marginalized group, along with all the social capital that comes with it. It's no surprise that corporate America is a fan of this idea. They want us all to be mindless consumers sitting around sedentary with our mouths open, ingesting whatever they shovel in. That's why it's not just Dove that's pushing this. It's why Apple selected several overweight actors for their little Mother Nature sketch, as I mentioned. It's why Calvin Klein and Abercrombie and Victoria's Secret now throw obese models in our faces. It's why Gatorade, supposedly a brand that promotes athleticism, is putting fat yoga instructors in its ads, and so on. We see this all over the place. At the height of the Occupy Wall Street movement, which was the last time corporate America was truly worried about the left in this country, there was a saying that you would hear a lot. Outside of the home of JP Morgan's president, outside Citibank's corporate headquarters, activists would chant, "Eat the rich." Well, it took a while, but these mega corporations have finally found a way to stop those chants outside their offices and ensure that they'll never again come back. The race stuff and the BLM propaganda, the trans hysteria, it's a good start. But now they've identified their finishing move. They've realized that what they need to do is to convince the left to eat. Not to eat the rich, but just to eat. And as of now, that effort is succeeding beyond their wildest imagination. They are sleeping soundly in the financial district tonight. That's because they know that the fat liberation movement, now unleashed, will soon devour what remains of the left. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.